Internet jokes. I will point out that I thought up the title for this workshop on a deadline. If I'd had more time, I would have called it Just Jokes.
No.
We have a surprise guest here on the panel who's not listed in your programs that I want to point out here. Mr. Jay Smooth has come. Now, since he's not in the program, he doesn't have a bio in the program, so I will not be introducing him. You thought I was kidding? So before we get started, I want to introduce our panelists to you. Sitting here is my friend and one of the smartest people I know, Samhita Mukhopadhyay. Samhita is the editor of the excellent website Feministing. She is, what else have you done? You're a social media strategist. You wrote a book.
I did.
Outdated. Who was at Samhita's panel last night? Wasn't it crazy? That was actually the first Facing Race workshop I've ever gotten to attend, and it was worth every minute that I've waited. So thank you for that. And here we have Negin Farsad. I'm not saying left and right because I'm dyslexic, but this is Negin Farsad. Negin Farsad is... Why aren't people applauding for Negin Farsad?
I don't want your pity applause.
Negin is a stand-up comic of many years. She's also a filmmaker. She's also a policy analyst. And she recently made a really excellent film called The Muslims Are Coming. Who's heard about it?
Yeah.
The Muslims Are Coming is a documentary about Negin's tour through the red states. Tour also called The Muslims Are Coming, with 5 other comics. With a total of 6 Muslim stand-up comics going into the places where they thought Islamophobia would be the densest and the most present, and telling those people jokes until they cracked. It is an amazing piece of cinema, and it looks really good, too. I've seen some documentaries that did not, but... And then, just kidding. Jay Smooth, for folks who don't know, is one of the foremost... Can I say that? One of the foremost video bloggers. Do you want to qualify her there, or just want to leave it at that? One of the foremost video bloggers.
Like video bloggers is a humble enough bar.
Jay talks a lot about race, politics, gender, language, everything in between. He's been on the internet for a long time. He founded the first website. And right now he's doing stuff for Animal New York, and actually he was just on BET talking about weed. So thanks for, thanks for pushing back on those stereotypes. And then down here at the end, thank you very much for being here, we appreciate it. And down here at the end we have Kamau Bell. Whose recent accomplishments include being the MC of the Facing Race 2012 conference. He's also a San Franciscan. He's been doing stand-up comedy for a long time, and has been helping people get their performances together for a long time. And a lot of folks probably know him from his very own TV show on an actual TV station, FX, totally biased with Kamau Bell.
Yeah.
Alright, so that's our folks. We've got a 90-minute panel here today. I'm going to leave about 20 minutes at the end for questions. So whatever you got, go ahead and start thinking about it now. Right now I'd like to tell you all a secret, which is that I don't know how to use PowerPoint. But I do know how to use stickies. So here's what we're going to be talking about. itself too. I'm Channing Kennedy. I'm a contributor to Colorlines.com. I also manage social media and new media stuff. Colorlines.com! Channing Kennedy! And in my writing at Colorlines.com, a lot of what I've done over the past couple of years is talk to artists of color and white artists as well about the idea of audience, about what it's like telling jokes to your people when other people's people can be hearing them. This is a concept that has changed a lot at any given point in history. Actually, I'm going to bug Kamau about that in a bit. But most recently, it's really changed because of course, the internet. And more specifically, things like Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, social networks that let us connect with a very specific group of people in a place that's not quite public, but also not quite private. So it's very hard to tell who's laughing with you and who's not. And so the question is this a problem? In thinking about comedy, I come up with a couple of tenets here that I'm going to drag out here. So number one is comedy is a very collaborative medium, which means that it's really, really dependent on its audience. What I mean by this is comedy, okay, so first of all, comedy is an art form. We're going to take that as a given if you're in this space. If you don't think that, this is not a safe space, you should just go ahead and leave. Fine, we'll change that part. And as an art form, comedy is really unique. Check this out. A painting that nobody likes is still a painting. A joke that nobody likes is something that I probably worked really hard on. So we see that comedy really relies a lot on constant feedback from audience and artist. This shows up really, really immediately in the form of stand-up comedy, where folks have to be there in front of people telling jokes and maneuvering throughout the night and try to maintain a group of people into doing what they want to do, even though the group of people is also giving them feedback at the same time. Negin and Kamau here have both been stand-up comics for a long time.
You say that, it makes it sound so sad.
Nearly, yeah. And I do want to say that in preparation for this panel, I did my first ever set of stand-up comedy. And I have to say that what these folks do for a living, like for their job, you see them up there on stage and think like, oh, that looks kind of difficult. The truth is, it's really not difficult at all. Moving on. So I think we talked about this a little bit already. As the concept of audience changes, that means that comedy changes along with it too. I mean, you know, funny is still funny, farts are still funny, but as we're forced to negotiate between the audience and the performer, that content between them changes. Okay, here's a big one. In our society, comedy, like all art, is subject to capitalist rules. And I mean both financial capital and social capital in the ways that those two are interlinked. And I think actually Kamau's shows are a really good example of this. Kamau is the only black late night host right now. Is that right?
TJ Holmes, I think, technically.
Okay.
Unless you're calling him not black.
No. I'm not trying to jump in any of that. So why is that? Why is every late night host a white man? It has to do...
I was going to say because everything's a white man, but that's fine.
No, you can jump in and cut me off.
No.
So talk about that.
I mean, I think comedy is subject to capitalist rules. I think in the comedy club, those rules are half social, half financial, but on television, it's mostly financial. You know, so I currently have a talk show gig. We have one episode left, and we haven't found out yet if we come back, and it could be for many reasons, but it's certainly, many of those will be, can we afford to lose much more money with this Negro?
Okay, so that's at FX Networks.
Yes. You know, at some point, you know, as a comedian, you know, if you're going to pursue it as a job, as a stand-up comedian, if you're going to pursue it as a job, you're going to have to create an act that plays to as wide an audience as possible, or you have to create an act, this is my opinion, that is specific as possible and hope there's enough people who like that thing that they can pay your rent for you.
And if you can't be rent paid by comedy, then you're not going to be a comic for very long.
Well, no, you can still be a comic. I mean, I would say most stand-up comics are doing other things to make money. The problem is a lot of times people don't think that makes you a professional. They think like, oh, you have a day job. Well, yeah. So, but yeah, I think you can, you know, there's all levels of stand-up comedy as far as that goes.
Okay. Let's dig into this a little bit more. So my fourth and final point is kind of reiteration of jokes affect audience, audience affects jokes. But really that's what I want to talk about here, because society is involved in all this. And I have one final point, which is this baby cheetah. I'd like everyone to note his round head and his sleepy eyes. All right. So Kamau, since we've already started talking to you a little bit, I'd like to talk to you about when you got your show, you made a really explicit decision about who you're going to bring along as writers to your show. Because you knew that would be a big step up for them, but you also had to choose people that you already had experience working with.
Yes.
Can you speak to us about that?
I did what you said. No, I knew that I wanted a very specific style of show, and I knew that the style of show that I wanted didn't currently exist on television. And I was really worried about the fact that if I got into a room with a bunch of writers who didn't know me, because I don't know if you guys know this, I'm not famous. So, I'm a little bit more famous than I was, but at that point I was really not famous. I was afraid that I would then be sort of put in a position to have to argue with people about my voice. So it became very critical to me to make sure I got friends of mine who were brilliant comedians who I figured already had my voice, already understood the kind of things I was going to say. It hasn't eliminated the fact that sometimes there's arguments that break out about things that I will or won't do, you know, that's part of the creative process, but it certainly, I think, is going better than it was. Chris Rock is a producer of my show, one of the executive producers, and we had a conversation yesterday, and he's like, nobody has ever brought as many friends into a TV show as you have. He said, maybe Eddie Murphy. And I was like, I'll take that as a compliment. Yes, I brought a lot of people from the Bay Area, and a lot of people like Janine Brito, Nato Green, Kevin Avery, and then friends of mine who are from the Bay Area, Dwayne Kennedy, Kondabolu, people who I had worked with over the years who I felt would understand what I was trying to do.
And then just recently you hired a new writer.
Aparna Nancherla. Yeah, we hired, yes. Yes, she's great. And somebody I knew who wasn't a close friend of mine like the other people were. But yeah. Also, just trying to being aware that on television and comedy, that there's not, you know, I mean, forget the fact that there's not a lot of black hosts, there's not a lot of people of color on mainstream television comedy. And FX is not known as that network. And it wasn't even about it, but I felt like if I can do anything, I can do that. You know? And I sort of feel like at this point, either this show will catch fire and be on for years to come, or it'll just be that weird thing that happened in 2012 that's part of like grad school papers. You know what I'm saying? There's that weird point where there was a lot of brown people on TV on the FX network.
How did Chris Rock get a hold of you in the first place? How did he see you?
How did he see me? Seems like such a big question. I was doing my solo show, the Kamau Bell Curve, Ending Racism, in about an hour at the UCB Theater in New York. And after the show, I walked backstage, and Chris Rock walked backstage, and I didn't know he'd been there. And he was like, "Yeah, you're funny." I mean, you know, it's kind of, I always tell the story, and I feel like it's the way that Michael Jordan would be like, "You got a good jump shot, but who gives a shit?" You know what I mean? What are you going to do with that jump shot? And so that was kind of what he was saying. And then a couple months later, he called me and said he wanted to help me get a TV show, which I didn't know what that meant at all, because I was in the Bay Area, sort of making the weird comedy art and aiming for a very specific audience, and sort of giving up on the idea of that kind of success, and accepting that it wasn't my thing, you know. So, and he sort of pulled me out and did this, and that's where we are now.
But it also sounds like in the interviews with him, he made a really specific decision to put a black man on TV.
Yes. And he's one of the few black men who can make that decision. You know, I mean, there's several different things that pulled this together for the show, is that, you know, and I feel like I'm a part of that, but it's like Chris Rock being in a position in his career where he can get a meeting with anybody in Hollywood at any time about anything. FX being a network that, even though I never thought about going on FX, being a network that actually likes to do interesting comedy things, you know. They're, you know, not necessarily diversity, but I'm just another part of that FX puzzle with like Archer and Louie and, you know, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. They do a lot of interesting things. And the internet, being that I was just this weird dude on the internet with not a lot of, I don't have any viral videos. There's people in this room who have way more viral videos than I do. Yes. Talking about you, Franchesca. And YouTube. And come on, everybody. But it's like the right person happened to see it. Chris Rock saw one of my videos and sort of thought that guy looks like he might have something in him. And as he said on Terry Gross, if I'm not going to help, and this is him saying this, an intelligent black guy, who's going to help an intelligent black guy? So, you know. And notice he didn't say funny black guy, he said intelligent black guy.
Poor thing. So I think this gets back to a central point, that the reason that there are a lot of white men in front of cameras on TV is because there's a lot of white men behind cameras on TV. And the way, so far, the most effective way for everyone else to get in front of the camera is to have people behind the camera. It's through our existing social networks that we increase our spread. And I really want to give you credit because I think that you've done a wonderful job of paying that forward with the folks that you work with. Not just...
I mean, you know, I think Chris said this too. It's like, I'm not doing favors for people, they're doing favors for me.
Yeah, no, I don't mean to imply that you're like, I just want to be, it's that I'm happy to be surrounded by the people. We're all like-minded politically and comedically, and I'm happy to have met them so that we can do this for each other. Yeah, I think it's two parts. Like, actually, Hari wrote a really nice piece about you recently where he said, Kamau is one of the few other comics that he saw on the scene who believe that if you want to criticize racism, you must also take sexism into account.
Which was taught to me by a lesbian, let me be clear about that. I didn't come up with that. She actually told me that because I was fucking up. So my friend Martha Reinberg said, yeah, I was doing a show about ending racism, and she said that to me. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then she went through my show and showed me all the sexist narratives. And I listened.
Let's all applaud the man for listening.
Let's know.
I think it might be a good cue to play a short clip from Kamau's show. This is actually a piece that did not air on the TV show itself. This is a little web exclusive, which Kamau then said that he wished had been on the TV show because it then became really popular. So this is Kondabolu.
Next Tuesday, Fox premieres Mindy Kaling's new show, The Mindy Project. The Office star will now play a doctor looking for love. This is the first sitcom created and starring an Indian American. To discuss this historic occasion, here's totally biased writer and Indian American Ari Kondabolu. Ari Kondabolu, everybody!
Mindy Kaling has the first ever sitcom starring an Indian American. This is huge. We've had an amazing run the last few years with more Indians in the public eye than ever before. There's like 14 of us now. Oh, hey, how'd I get up there? That's progress in real time. There's now enough Indian people where I don't need to like you just because you're Indian. Because growing up, I had no choice but to like this. Yeah. Apu, a cartoon character voiced by Hank Azaria, a white guy. A white guy doing an impression of a white guy making fun of my father. If I saw Hank Azaria do that voice at a party, I would kick the shit out of him. Yeah. Or I'd imagine kicking the shit out of him. I mean, we only put up with Apu for so long because he was still better than this. Yeah, that's us eating monkey brains in Indiana Jones. Indians don't eat monkey brains. I don't know how many times I have to make that clear. You can't just make up random racist shit and pretend it's true. I mean... What if I said white people's eyes turned red in photographs because they're part devil? All right. Now I'll tell you something that's not true. I'm joking. I'm joking, kind of. Anyway, things are getting better. And now that we have so many more famous Indian people, I can publicly talk shit about famous Indian people. Hey, Bobby Jindal, you're the governor of Louisiana and you're Indian. That's an unbelievable achievement. But you're against abortion and gay marriage, so you can go to hell. Hey, Dinesh D'Souza, you have really nice skin. You must use cocoa butter. But you made the new anti-Obama movie 2016 Obama's America, so I wish you didn't exist. Yeah, and it hurts. And it hurts me to say that because you look like my uncle. Tom. And hey, actors who agreed to be in this commercial.
Wireless fees and taxes bite like a cobra. Get a cellular mongoose. Metro PCS.
Do I really need to explain why I hate this? That's two stereotypes at the same time. Stereotypes in stereo. And finally, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. I hate you. I mean, you're a good dude and all, but why you gotta be so handsome and be a doctor and make my parents feel bad? Anyway, congratulations to Mindy Kaling on her new show. I'll be honest, I was a little worried this week when I was told Mindy was in Glamour magazine dressed as a Simpsons character. Oh God, no. Progress. I'm Hari Kondabolu.
That guy should have his own show.
Maybe you can talk to someone. Does that video do jokes about Dinesh D'Souza and cocoa butter speak to an essential truth of white male Republican voters? I'm going to take that as a no. Is that okay? Is it okay to make a TV show that doesn't just talk to white people?
Absolutely. Please.
Thank you. I'm not asking for permission. I mean, it's already happening. My point here is that although TV is incredibly white, and is actually by some metrics getting whiter, there's no logical reason for it. And that sounds, trite to say, but I think it doesn't really, for me at least, become as evident as when I watch something like that. And I realize that this is funny. It's not talking directly to me, and it's still funny. I think it is a problem when you underestimate your audience. And I think that's what television driven by money, has been doing for a very long time. Guys, let's pivot out of that. And let's pivot this way. Hello.
Hi.
So, Samhita, speaking of this, can you talk to us a bit about what happens when comedy goes wrong?
Yes. Well, I can talk a little bit about, as an unfunny feminist.
What is it like being humorless?
Very productive. So I don't know how many of you followed this comedian, what's his name, Daniel Tosh? Yeah. Who had some moment in a stand-up situation where what did he say? Can someone remind me? There's a...
I can whisper to you that you can say it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be funny if that girl got raped right now? Like, what if 5 guys just raped her? Wouldn't that be
right? And so, the feminist internet was like, this is very problematic for obvious reasons, and comedians were like, but it's funny, like, why can't you take a joke? Why can't you feminists take a joke? Including, some of our boyfriends, Louis C.K. And the interesting response to that is thinking about, okay, it's not that feminists don't have senses of humor, we just have really high standards for humor, right? It's really easy to kind of pick on stuff, oh my god, rape, that is so hilarious, like, oh, those incarcerated pregnant youth that have to give birth in shackles, hilarious, it's like, humor shouldn't be already perpetuating something that's deeply problematic in society, right? Humor should always be projecting that way to targets, right? That's what makes it effective, essentially, but that's also what makes it provocative and not just beating up and making you a bully and an asshole. So it's not like we don't have a sense of humor, it's that we just want smart jokes. And so many times in my life where people will be like, oh my god, you must hate this comedian because he's a sexist, or he's this and that. And I think it's just important to remember that what makes effective comedy is just as much kind of what is also what makes effective social change, right? It's really incisive, really intelligent, kind of introspective ideas about the world. And I think kind of perpetuating ideas about legitimate rape, going in that direction is not the most effective form of humor. Conservatives give us tons of stuff to kind of be funny about, right? So it's almost like, I took a sketch writing class where I was trying to write, I was trying to get funny, and I was trying to write jokes about the GOP, and none of the sketches actually sounded different from what happens in the news, at all, because we actually are in a cultural context where politicians, believe that your uterus can shut things down and you can't get pregnant from rape, and I think that humor is such a useful tool in those places because you kind of have to laugh about that, while kind of doing the serious on the ground work. You also have to just step back and be like, wow, this motherfucker made it to 50 something or 60 something years old and genuinely believes the uterus can shut certain forms of sperm down. That's a reality. And so that's plenty of material to kind of be funny with outside of this really kind of lowbrow humor, which I'm all for lowbrow humor actually, if it's funny. But outside of this kind of oh my god, wouldn't it be funny if you were gang raped? How, that's just, it's not the most effective form of humor. So that said, we have some examples.
I understand you brought a clip.
Yes.
So while I get this set up, I want to ask, do you think it's that feminists have higher, of which I would count myself one, do you think feminists count themselves as that they have higher standards for comedy? Or is that like everyone else, they want comedy that speaks to their values, that reinforces their values?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, everybody wants media and comedy that speaks to their values. But I wouldn't necessarily say, the standard is that it reinforces your values, right? I mean, I think naturally people gravitate toward that kind of content, right? Even with political blogging or political writing, you're going to read the sites that you agree with mostly. But I do think people want to be pushed generally, right? I mean, I shouldn't say generally, but I do think there are audiences that kind of want to be pushed. They want provocative content. And so I think it's kind of like, it's like a test, right? It's like, if you can make a feminist laugh, you probably thought a little bit more about your jokes, right?
So you think that's funny?
I think it's funny that it's all white women on there, actually. Another thing I was thinking about when you were playing Hari's clip as well is while we kind of have shared values to an extent, right? And there is comedy or Kamau's show kind of speaking to our shared set of values. What are the concessions that kind of comedians or women or people of color have to make it to the mainstream? And I was so curious when Mindy Kaling's show came out, not just because I actually want to be her and have told her on Twitter, she ignores me, but I have multiple times told her on Twitter. I sent her my book, actually. Trying to be you, okay? What pieces of like her show were going to be about her being Indian? How much of it had to be about her being Indian? What conversations were going to be happening around the show about her South Asianness? And it's not something she talks about a lot, right? She changed her name, like most really famous South Asians, which that's why I love Tom Haverford's character on Parks and Recreation, because he plays a South Asian that changed his name, which is hilarious to me because no one actually ever talks about that. Almost every famous South Asian has changed their name, right? Like really famous South Asian. So what parts of it is she going to play up? And her show has been really funny, and I think she's like has acknowledged that she's South Asian on it once or twice. But I often wonder like how many concessions has she kind of had to make to get into that money pot, to get into that circle of like this is going to be this is going to catch on, this is going to kind of appeal to the broadest audience possible, and is it something that's like evolving and changing, or is it something that like we continue to have to kind of change and be like, okay, like as a feminist, like I guess I'll be okay with that like sort of rape joke as long as I can, like what kind of negotiations are we making at this point?
Hello, Negin.
Hey.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
You've been kind of quiet because I haven't called on you yet. Talk to us about what it's like using comedy, not just making political jokes, but using comedy as a political tool itself.
Okay, that's pretty broad or something. But
okay, let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the Muslims are coming.
Okay, I can do that. Well, so basically, Channing mentioned earlier, I took a bunch of like Muslim comedians and to places like Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia and Arizona and Idaho, right? Places where they love the muzzies, and we did shows and we did street actions or whatever, and we got people to engage, and some people really like had like honest questions of us, and it was really interesting because like people that really hate you, what they do in this day and age. This is like the new face of hating Muslims. If you're on the street like manning a booth called an Ask a Muslim booth, for example, and you're in Birmingham, or you're in, I don't remember where I did that, Lawrenceville, Georgia. So like we would have people like drive up to the light, and then they would wait until the light turned green, and then they would turn over and they would yell, "Go back to your country." I was born in New Haven, but and they would drive off, and that happened to us like all the time in the course of making this film, and that was like the most, and I think that was like the most direct shittiness that we experienced, that of being detained at the border in Arizona. Anyways, so you're not going to really be able to convince those people because they drive off too quickly. But you can certainly have an impact on people who actually approach, the Ask a Muslim booth, and who actually like ask you a question, which by and large there were two questions. One was, why don't you denounce terrorism? Just like morning, noon, and night, constantly just wake up and denounce it, you know what I mean? go on a date, denounce it. Fuck a dude, denounce it. And so that was one question. And then the other question was, why are you dressed like that if you're a Muslim? That in there heavily implied, like, why are you dressed like such a slut? Which I'm fine with. And so those are the two like main questions that the American public had of us throughout the tour. So I think actually listening to those questions, because they're legitimate questions, and why are they legitimate questions? I mean, they sound kind of ridiculous to us because we're like really smart progressives, but everyone else isn't like actually exposed to the same kind of stuff that we're exposed to every day, right? Like what they get to see is the news, and the news is really biased, and the news only presents as kind of like one portrait of Muslims, which is that they're constantly warring, you know what I mean? And they're so violent, and they're really dusty and poor. So I think when you see those images, you really, and that's all you're getting from the mainstream media, you know, and you're just a regular person, that it's fair to have those kinds of questions, you know what I mean? Because it doesn't matter that like umpteen groups denounced terrorist attacks, you know, every time a terrorist attack happens, you know, because that's just not fun news. Nobody picks it up. It's not like, in breaking news, a bunch of Muslim groups think terrorism is bad. Like, that's not something you hear. And so, so I think, so that's part of it. And so that, there, the end. What? I don't know what to say.
Talk to us about the group of folks that you brought along with you.
Yeah, well, that's another thing that was really important for me, because I, like, you know, this question of like who's your audience and all that stuff is really interesting to me, because my audience is white liberals. Like, I do not sit well with Muslims, right? By and large. I mean, there's like some that totally love me, and I'm clearly delightful, so it makes sense. But there are others, you know, that really have to find it troubling, like the stuff that I say on stage, that I'm so like, just like, talk about my crotch all the time and shit like that, you know. Some people find that very off-putting. To be fair, there are a bunch of Jews and Christians who also find it off-putting. So my crotch equal opportunity off-puts. So I'm that kind of Muslim, okay? But there are like practicing Muslim American comedians, you know, who we were touring during Ramadan, which was funny, I mean, I was just, you know, eating scones the whole time, but they had to fast. I mean, they, you know, because they're really hardcore practicing, and so we had some comics who were fasting. We have some comics that, you know, pray 5 times a day. We have some comics that just really ran the spectrum, who don't drink but don't fast. You know what I mean? So there's, and what was really important for us is to reflect the kind of spectrum of Muslims you have in the diaspora. And I think we're used to, like, when you say like Jewish, you're used to being like, oh, I mean, you know, there's like the Woody Allen Jews, there's the like hardcore, like Hasidic Jews. There's, you know, we can think of a spectrum, you know, and for me, like, I don't have a single Jewish friend that actually does anything Jewish, but they're so Jewish, you know. And I'm sure you guys, anyone who lives in New York City, knows exactly what I'm talking about. So, bagels. So I think that's where we're headed, and I think Catholics probably experienced this too earlier on. We need to sort of establish that there's a range, that, you know, and that we're not all like, you know, self-flagellating. So that was kind of, that explains the kind of people that we brought on tour with us.
You brought a spectrum.
A spectrum.
A spectrum of Muslims.
Yeah. And one of them was even black. Yeah, Kamau, I said it.
No, that's one of the things that struck me about the movie is that is the racial diversity of the Muslims that you brought along.
Yeah, one of
You seem like that you brought them along and you just like had them all like
and one of them is like half Peruvian, and I'm.
You can name names, not to say.
Oh yeah, Kareem Omari is half Peruvian and half Syrian, a normal combination. And Preacher Moss was our resident black Muslim. There was a couple of Palestinians. I'm Iranian. Iranians and Arabs don't always mix, and they did on this tour because that shit is ridiculous. We should mix, and you know, yeah. And Dino Vidal is my co-producer. The main other guy is half Palestinian and half Sicilian. So he actually grew up with a Catholic mom and a Muslim dad. And he's just like, I started to think both are cool, you know. And that's kind of how he lives his life with two religions.
I thought of what we're about to see here, which is one of the instances where you went out with a booth into the street. I think this is in Birmingham. And just talked to people on the street about what it's like being Muslim. Let them ask you questions. Let them interact with you. I thought was really powerful. I'm going to talk about myself just for 1 second. I grew up in small rural towns in Maine and Nebraska and Missouri. I did not have a black friend. I didn't know a black person until I was 16 because that's the year we got the internet. It is very possible, if you're not in a city, to be in a very homogenous environment and never be challenged to go outside of it. Challenge might not even be the right word. Like, there's never an opportunity. Nothing ever comes up in the first place. And so, of course, people are going to think crazy shit about people they've never met. That's what we do with people that we've never met. That's human nature. So I think we can split, and I'll have one more part. Let me try one thing. Hang on a second. While I'm doing this, Negin, whose responsibility is it for people to meet each other?
Right. So this is totally something I'm obsessed with in life, and also we talk about a little bit in the movie because like here's the hilarious. So my parents were like, Jews are lame, like forever. They were weird about Jews because like a lot of Iranians are weird about Jews. And then we had a next door neighbor move in California where I grew up, and they were Jews. And they brought over a rum cake, and literally that's all it took. For then my parents became friends. They were friends with these people for years. And it all started because of a stupid fucking rum cake, which incidentally I have to add was really moist and delicious. And so I feel like, and so then their story became, oh, Jews are really family oriented, just like Iranians. And, but it sounded more like Jews are very family oriented, just like Iranians. That's what it sounded. And so like, I don't, you know, I think they didn't go out and seek it or whatever, and you know, and the neighbors were, I think, just trying to make friends and be neighborly or whatever. And so I think it's hard because you, like, especially in this kind of situation, you're here from another country, you don't speak the language very well, it's like weird, you're just trying to like make ends meet, and you're like afraid, you know what I mean? So it's hard to like go the extra mile, the extra step, and be like, guys, be my friend, I'm totally normal, it's cool. After having to fight to get here, after having to leave your whole family, everything that comforts you in life, you've left it behind, come to a new country, and then guess what? You still have so much more work to do just to make a living. Now do so much more work to like reach out to people. And so I feel like that's a lot to ask of immigrants. I feel like we have as an American-born person, like, it's easier for us to do it, you know? It's just, it's easier, there's less on our plate. isolate socially. So I feel like immigrants have to step out more and be more open. But I think, like, you know, American-born folks, white people, like, should it's just easier, so do it. What's the big deal? It's only weird if you make it weird, you know what I mean? So, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we're gonna try this again. Does that seem better?
Yeah.
Come on down, folks. Good old people of Alabama. Come on down and let's see if you can name that religion.
Exodus means it's old.
Exodus Old Testament.
Yeah. You want to play Name That Religion?
Rami, we're playing this game. Name that religion.
We're going to read a quote, and you're going to tell us if it was Old Testament, New Testament, or the Quran. Okay. All right?
The Americans know almost nothing about Islam. Nothing. They've never looked at the Quran. And if they did, they wouldn't know what they found in it.
3 questions. If you get 2 right, you win any of those prizes. Alabama shot glass right here. We've got this. It's Christmas always in Alabama, Birmingham.
I see you salivating already, and yes, these are salt and pepper shakers.
So that's one prize.
So this is a real possibility for in your future. And here we go. Which holy book stipulates that a girl who does not bleed on her wedding night should be stoned to death? Old Testament, New Testament, the Quran.
It doesn't bleed on her first night?
The Quran. I'll say Quran.
Quran.
That was a very quick answer. And why did you answer that way?
Because of women are subjective to men.
It is the Old Testament. Deuteronomy, dude. Deuteronomy.
There's an awful lot of going into the Quran and looking for lines in scripture that seem violent or ugly in one way or another. And of course, what is never said is that these kinds of statements can be found in virtually all holy scripture.
All right, here's another one.
Really want those.
We can't give you that away. You got to earn that, buddy. I'm not kidding around. All right, here we go. Okay, which one says that if you work on the holy day, you should be put to death?
Gonna go with the Quran on that one.
No, my young friend. It's actually from Exodus 35:2, Surah 3:4-2.
This is the worst contest that could have been.
I can't expect people to understand the nuances of Islam. We've grown up in a Judeo-Christian world where those traditions are remarkably familiar to us. People know about them without knowing how they learned about them.
Mary said, "My Lord, how can I have a son when no man has touched me?" He said, God thus creates whatever he wills to have anything done. He simply says to it, be, and it is.
See, my last impulse was wrong on that, on the one, so I'm going to go with, let's say, Old Testament.
Dude, it's the Quran! What is wrong with you, buddy? Come on!
You know, among the many prophets that Muslims believe, Jesus is one of the mighty prophets. I cannot consider myself following Muhammad unless I consider myself as a follower of Jesus Christ, Moses, and other prophets.
Put your sword back into its place, for those who live by the sword die by the sword.
I'm thinking Old Testament.
Yeah, New Testament.
I'll take Old Testament.
I'm gonna go Old Testament.
New Testament. Very close though, because they both have the word testament in the title. So because of that, behold,
still get a prize.
Behold what you have
That's
here.
so giving.
Don't air this because I'm ordained.
No.
Are you really sure?
These are very abstract quotes here. And you know, there's not a whole lot of difference between the three in some cases.
Then that's maybe the point we're trying to make. Okay, everybody.
I'm sure there's just tons of garbage.
And then it just goes into white people talking about how cool Muslims are.
Yeah, something like that. It's not that dark, I promise. I don't know what's happening. The movie is actually beautifully color corrected, so I don't know why.
No, that's my fault. I apologize for presenting your film in that way. I want to bump forward a little bit and talk about the internet, which I think we can wrap up in like 5 minutes. So as the internet has democratized so many things, comedy is definitely among them. This leads to some places where folks have new opportunities, and also, as some of those opportunities are opportunities to recreate the same problems once again. I think that one of the best examples of this, who's familiar with this site? Yo, is this racist? Tumblr run by one Mr. Andrew T, a guy living in LA. Funny, funny site. For those who don't know, it's basically a site where folks write in with questions. The question is, you know, hey, can I'm a white guy, can I call my black friends by the N-word since they all do it? And, yo, is this racist? And he says, yes. This site blew up really quickly. I interviewed Andrew on Colorlines, which actually is a good interview, I think. You should look it up. Maybe like at the beginning of this year, pretty shortly after it launched. And within 2 days, he went from just cold launch to having 2,000 people subscribing to it. And the number just grew exponentially after that, got write-ups in a lot of places. He did very well for himself. And then things got interesting. Because Andrew's doing this on Tumblr. And for folks who are older than 19, Tumblr is a micro-blogging website. It's sort of like Twitter, but with bigger pictures. You can sort of think of it like that. It's very inducive to forming little pockets of community where people like-minded can talk to each other. And as a result, Tumblr has an incredible social justice community of people who take social justice really, really seriously. Sometimes really, really seriously, and sometimes in a really smart way. Folks have analysis, and honestly, Colorline stuff shows up on Tumblr all the time. We don't even put it there. People just like it and read it and want to share it with their friends and have conversations about it. And if people are talking about Colorline's content, then they must be smart and great. And as a result, Andrew sort of ran into the same thing that actually Kamau, you were just talking about, where he was making jokes about racism, but with a misogynistic lens, because that's the kind of humor that he grew up with. And he got feedback about it. And he got a lot of feedback about it, not just saying, hey, cut that shit out, but also people wanting to take him aside, wanting to send him links to stuff for him to read, wanting to start a conversation with him. And as a result, his politics changed significantly over just the first couple of months of running this site. If you start at the beginning of the archives and scroll your way through, it's really fascinating to watch the evolution. I think this is a key example of what I was talking about earlier, where audience changes jokes and jokes change audience. And Andrew's been able to use this to spin up. He's been writing different places. He's sort of gotten a career that's beginning to build up off of this. Here's the other interesting thing about Yo, Is This Racist? It went from 0 subscribers to 2,000 subscribers in 2 days. Andrew is also friends with the guy who runs Stuff White People Like. He had social capital at his disposal. He didn't have financial capital, or maybe he does. With Tumblr, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't cost anything to run one. But you've got to have social capital, at least to get started. Now, I don't say that to belittle anything that he's done here. Andrew's done a great job of just producing content and being funny and having politics consistently since the site launched months ago. I don't know if any of you have tried to do something in your spare time for months at a time. I've never done it. Yeah, except for feministing. Thank you for doing that. And I think that's I bring that up because I think it's important to realize that even on the internet, where everything's free and everyone has access in theory, there's still a social economy that can't be ignored. And it really comes into practice when not just who is funny, because you can be funny, like I said, you can't be funny in a vacuum. You have to have an audience. And until you find an audience, you're not really funny. One other thing that I want to pick on a little bit about Andrew is that he also recently launched a podcast, Yo, Is This Racist? And besides Jay Caspian King, all the guests on it are white men. So, Andrew, if anyone's tweeting this, come on, dude! Anyway. You couldn't hear, but Negin just went like, oh, Jesus Christ. One other person that I want to pop out here as an example, a woman named Tracy Clayton, who's better known as Brokey McPoverty. Jay knows her. She's great. She's out of Louisville, not a big city, but her presence on the internet is strong. A while ago, I interviewed her about a site she did, which is actually too big to fit on the screen. Little known Black history facts. This is a Tumblr that is dormant for 11 months of the year, but it's up and functioning during the month of February, Black History Month, where she introduces you to little known Black history heroes, little known Black history facts.tumblr.com, such as Troy Booker, the first to refer to a flavor of Kool-Aid as red. The entire site is just taking like stock photos of Black people and then putting some dubious achievement under them. At first it seems like it's making fun of Black people, like it's a Black person making fun of Black people. But I interviewed her. And she got deep on it. She said she's not making fun of Black people, she's making fun of the Black history industrial complex. Wow. She's making fun of the idea that Black people are must be represented at all times as a pure, spotless monolith of virtue, that Black people are humans, and that that's a good thing that should be talked about and joked about. Actually, she had a really good quote about it that I can bring up here. She says, this is Tracy. I asked her, like, what would you do if someone said, like, hey, this just seems like a, do you have a problem with Black History Month? And she said, well, if I heard someone else say that, my response would be, but if you're displeased with Black History Month, why not do something to make it better? My answer to that question, I don't want to, and I don't have to. One of the most important freedoms we should have is autonomy, and it's not in my job description as a Black woman to never laugh about my history. Yes. And she's doing that on the internet where people can see it. Is the internet involved enough now, and do people have enough power now that they can do what they want for the audience that they want?
I mean, I definitely think it's easier on the internet to find your own niche, and also to stay obscure enough that you don't reach beyond that niche. I mean, Dave Chappelle crossed the threshold where all types of people are watching, and lots of people who are not going to get the context that people within his niche were going to get. And I mean, I haven't really crossed over. I'm sort of the answer to your question about what happens if you can't make comedy a profession, which is you go on YouTube. And I don't even think of myself as a comedy person per se. I sort of found out I was funny when I started making these videos and everyone started laughing at me. I mean, you know, my background is in radio. I do a hip-hop radio show back in New York, and used to do a regular blog at hiphopmusic.com. And so I started making these videos just as a way to comment on whatever is making me yell at the TV screen that week. And I guess because I'm conflict avoidant, my anger came out in the form of jokes. And I think the greatest value to me of being on the internet and putting my stuff out that way is, I think it goes back to what you were talking about the audience impacting the jokes and the humor, and the opportunity to learn from people by throwing it out there and having their response come back at you. Because it's, I don't know who it was that said the comedy satire should be about punching up. Yeah. Yes, thank you. This is why we have it.
Well, you said it.
Not original.
But you know, punching up can easily become punching down if you, like if I feel animosity towards somebody for something unjust that they did and I want to vent that anger, you know, my nature, because of the poison I've internalized in this culture, is to pick out some other flaw about them that's unrelated. Like one of the early videos I made was talking about the Don Imus nappy-headed hose comment, and I sort of went into a side riff making fun of him for being really old, which is a sort of a cheap, easy way to get humor at someone's expense, but has nothing to do with what he did. It was actually foul, so it was putting that out there and having my audience check me on that. Like that's seeing how easily you can switch from punching up to punching down. That's, you know, over the years there's been a lot of things like, you know, making fun of Rush Limbaugh because he's fat or something like that. Like it's really easy to go off the rails and start perpetuating the stuff that we all get indoctrinated with.
Are you saying there are other things to criticize about Rush Limbaugh?
I know, I've been trying to find those other things.
I think he seems like such a good guy.
But I'm not sure where I'm going with this. But yeah, I mean that's, for me, even I feel like the internet can be the best of both worlds because I'm not famous or big enough that tons of people who aren't going to get it at all are going to be having the weird Dave Chappelle sorts of reactions, but there's a broad and diverse array of people connecting with it who are going to help me, because my videos are basically a documentation of my thought process that particular week, and it's sort of hard to represent that in a web video, that it's a two-way medium. Like I wish I could make what I'm doing more like Ta-Nehisi Coates' blog, where you see that it's two-way and there's always a discourse going on, but it's always just as much of a learning process for me. As I don't know if it's ever a learning process for anyone else, but it's a learning process for me, being able to put my half-baked ideas out there and then get this feedback from all the folks like you and just be able to take one step further in my understanding. So to me, it can be frustrating because each video becomes this one singular document, like especially the how to tell someone they sound racist video. You know, most YouTube videos, they get viewed for 48 hours and then go away, but that's become one that people just perpetually come back to. You know, people sort of use it as an example of how to engage that kind of conversation. And people on YouTube use it as an outlet to say the N-word to somebody in the comments. You know, it's something that provides service to a lot of people. And I get, you know, it's weird, I get people calling me nigger and Jew in equal parts on that page, which are both actually accurate, so I don't know. But there are definitely things about that video that I wish I had done differently if I knew that it was going to become this permanent, like I wouldn't have named it how to. I was sort of being sarcastic when I named it that because of course there can never be a how-to guide if you're talking about race or one correct way to talk about it. But I mean, I guess what I tried to represent in that video is just what I've been saying about the process I try to go through, which is finding a way to vent that anger and find humor in the thing I'm commenting on in a way that gets at, I want to derive humor from whatever was the foul act that was committed and not just clown the person in the 10 other ways you could clown somebody. Like attack the argument, not the person. So that's my very unfunny ramble.
How did you build up to where you're at now? Because you had a sort of circuitous path towards being on YouTube.
Towards obscurity. Well, I started, I mean, what you said about social capital is definitely very important because I've been doing media for almost 25 years now. I started doing my radio show back in New York in 1991 and started writing for the hip-hop magazines like The Source at that same time. One of my mentors was Bobito, who was here last night. He actually connected me with The Source magazine and all the record labels and helped me out. So I've spent a long time sort of building a network of connections and friends in the media world through hip-hop. And then I started hiphopmusic.com in 1997. So just building those circles of networks and connections makes it far easier for me to go from 0 to 100. I mean, if you're starting a Tumblr and you don't have the sort of connections Andrew T had or the kind of connections that I happen to have, you can still make it happen. I mean, if you, whatever your passion is, there's a community out there that shares that passion and you can become a part of that community and build out of that, but it's 100 times quicker if you have, you know, the privilege of connections and nepotism, you know, along with the other, you know, the types of privilege that Junot Diaz was talking about last night, just me being cute. and just, you know, but I'm not saying that I think I'm cute.
I'm talking about me.
But there's a certain box that you can fit in that's media friendly just in terms of being able to speak a certain way and even have a certain timbre to your voice. and just being a cisgender heterosexual male, I can put a video on YouTube about any topic and people are 10 times more likely to engage with what I'm saying instead of just commenting on my looks or my identity and so on and so on.
Actually, I want to call somebody out of the audience. Franchesca.
Yes.
Could you, everybody, Cheska Lay of the video Shit White Girls Say Black Girls is in the audience. I know your hair is tall, but you might also just stand up so we can see you. Okay.
Hi.
So I talked to you earlier, I wanted to ask you a question. So you were an overnight success, right?
No.
What sort of a success would you say that you were?
One of the best ways I heard my online career described was an overnight success 5 years in the making. I always worked a day job and then went home from my day job and worked on my blog, or worked on my blog while I should have been working at my day job. And made videos on the weekend, and you know, in terms of social capital, I didn't know people, so it really did take 5 years of plugging away to build an audience that just kind of laid the foundation for when Shit White Girls Say happened, for that to go viral, because I had kind of built up a following and I had made lots of videos over the years and kind of built my audience in a very organic way to kind of get where I am now.
Yeah, no, like when, so you were part of this like whole viral, like, you know, Shit Girls Say, and you jumped on that and added politics to it.
Yeah. And mine was the first one that was really specific. All of them were very general in, you know, shit yoga teachers say, or shit vegans say, or shit gay guys say. You know, mine was more specific in that it was about what white girls say to me. And that was mainly in response to the fact that I didn't relate to shit girls say, and I didn't relate to shit black girls say. Neither of them were about me. I couldn't relate to any of them. And so it was kind of my spin on both of those, because at the time Shit Black Girls Say was the most popular parody of Shit Girls Say, and so I just kind of wanted to do something that I could relate to and that spoke to my experience, and you know, it kind of just happened from there. Thank you for watching.
One other thing to note about Franchesca is that when Shit White Girls Say Black Girls came out, it had, you know, a bajillion views. But then if you went back to her previous video, which was not part of a major meme, it had half a bajillion views. She'd been doing that work to build that audience for years. So it wasn't like it was an overnight success. It was like she had that network that she had constructed. She had that capital that she had saved up, so that when the time was right, there was an audience that was there to support her. And it was cool. So one last thing I want to get into, because we're running short on time. Negin and Kamau, I want to ask you both about Culture Strike. What your work has been with them, what you did with them down in Arizona. Which sounds sketchy, but...
I went down to Arizona with the comedy stand-up group I'm in, Laughter Against the Machine. And we went down there working on a documentary about political comedy. And the whole idea for Laughter Against the Machine is like a lot of times when people do political comedy, they're just sort of reading it from the newspaper or the blogs and they're sort of making fun of the headlines. We were like, we should actually go to the places where, you know, stuff is happening. And so that maybe when we talk about those things, we can have a more informed opinion. And that's how we were invited by Jeff Chang in the back there.
Jeff Chang.
To go to Arizona and cross the border twice in one day and actually learned about the things and the issues, which I felt like is, you know, choosing comedy about social political issues, things that affect the world. The thing that happens is that I think I sort of wandered in. I didn't really choose to be this. I just sort of was attracted to the things I was attracted to. And then when you wander in and start talking about things, you can very quickly get called out when you're wrong. And so it becomes, I think it became my responsibility and responsibility of other comics. It's like, well, let me go actually see what I can learn about this so I can at least know what I don't know. And so that's what we, you know, Culture Strike was a big part of that. Culture Strike is set up to invite artists to learn about the thing. And then I think I like about Culture Strike, they don't give you an assignment. They just sort of go, just look at this and see if it bubbles up eventually in some other way, which is the best way to do with artists because no artist wants homework.
I didn't ever do anything with Culture Strike except for emotionally and spiritually I support.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Oh God, I put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I was like, I don't remember.
I didn't know this. I wasn't a part of it, but it sounds great, guys.
Okay, wait. Read
you didn't invite Muslims.
So awkward. Okay, I'm going to save this. By Culture Strike, I mean the work that your production company does with advocacy groups.
Yeah. So the question is, what do we do, or
talk to us about what your process is?
Yeah. So basically, clients come to us and they're like, we have this really important but dry and super boring issue. Can you do something to make it funny and fun and whatever? And so in the company's called Qualified Laughter, and we have a team, and we take we take stuff like Citizens United or tax havens or healthcare, big banks, whatever their issue is, and we try and jazz it up and make it funny.
And you're doing this for advocacy groups that normally would be terrified of anyone making jokes about their issue because it might alienate their base.
Yeah.
It might alienate their funders.
Yeah. And they're still terrified when we deliver a script that we're going to alienate, that we're going to piss a lot of people off. I mean, the notes we get on scripts are hilarious because they're like, oh, there are some vegan lesbians that might take issue with this one line, and it gets very specific, and we always have to kind of talk them off the cliff and be like, look, there's no way in comedy you're not going to offend somebody. You're going to offend somebody. This isn't a video with kittens in it. You're going to offend one person. So you just have to get over that, which is something that we deal with clients all the time. Just get over it. You're going to offend somebody, but you're going to attract far more by at least making your issue palatable and funny. You're going to get more supporters.
Mm-hmm. And so in a real way, you're reframing yourself as a cultural worker. That you are making yourself a part of this movement by using the skills that you have. Skills of being funny.
It's mostly because let's be honest, I also, have I auditioned for a Walmart commercial? Yes, I have. Don't feel good about it. Didn't get the part, so it's fine. But have I written for Nickelodeon in Comedy Central and MTV on shit that, on Justin Bieber jokes, shit that really does not matter for the world? I have done those jobs. So I do this kind of work so I don't kill myself at nights. Because otherwise, I would be a part of the problem and not part of the solution.
Well, I do want to bring this up and hammer it down a little bit because just like I was at the beginning, comedy is art, but a lot of folks don't see comedy as art, or they don't see comedy as a legitimate part of cultural communication. And cultural communication is what movements are all about. And I think Negin's I think that you're doing fantastic work as someone who's bridging that gap, someone who's turning comedy into a tool that can be used by people who are doing the right thing, instead of just white men like Daniel Tosh who want to make jokes about rape. That you're reclaiming funny for the rest of us. And I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, we have just a couple minutes left. Do we have questions from the audience? I saw this hand go up first.
So have you ever tried taking this comedy work internationally? Because I know sometimes it's a very difficult thing to have comedy transfer. Have you ever done anything internationally?
I performed a bunch in the UK.
You just went to the Cayman Islands.
I went to the Cayman Islands recently, but that was more to do something about tax havens there and bring it back here. So, but from the UK, you know, it's interesting because I feel like the Muslims Are Coming is not commercially available yet. It will be, and I think that'll be something. A lot of people, like in Germany, where they have. There's other countries where like the Muslim thing is much bigger a deal because they actually have a large population. We only have 4% here in the United States, so it's like, you know, which is mountains out of molehills, really, for us. But in other countries like Germany and the UK and France, it's a real thing, and they haven't you know, necessarily figured out the appropriate cultural artistic response to the problem. So they're interested in this film, which I think it would be very interesting to see how it plays there.
Other folks, see a hand here in the back?
Me?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clear up something, Channing. You said that it wasn't until you were 16 that you actually encountered a black person?
I think there was one black kid in my 3rd grade class, but I was only in that school for about a month. And I didn't sit next to him. No, literally, like, in all of my schools, I was in a high school of 1,000 people and 0 black students.
But I mean, like, what about the image of black people?
Oh no, oh no.
Stories, you know,
okay,
age chapter on slavery in the history book, that wasn't.
I'm not going to get into how Missouri public schools address the racial history of our country.
But your response was kind of in response to the film clip that we saw about people driving off and saying the derogatory comments about Muslims. And so I don't know, I just feel like, just in terms of putting that in context, like, yes, it does exist, but to me it means that the community schools and that community failed you if at 16, that is the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that representations of the Muslim community, representations of the black community, like that's 2 different entities in popular culture. In that, like, when I was a kid, like, The Cosby Show is my favorite show because that was a show that was on TV, but there were 0 representations of Islam, of Muslim people on TV. Okay. Or if there were, like, they were not positive.
I'm sorry, I misread your comment, but you said that was like the first time you saw a black person was on the internet.
Oh, no, but I
was like the school, oh yeah. That's what I was saying, I apologize. And then just one last quick question to the comedians and the people who are present on film and TV. For the people who aren't quite your audience yet, they know that you are somebody. What other people of color do they confuse you for?
I've now met Questlove and taken a picture with him so I can confirm I'm not Questlove. You know, I mean, it's funny, the thing that has actually happened with me is that I feel like because I haven't been on TV, I've been on TV before, but this is my first big inroads to Hello America, meet me. And I find that it's interesting, people are trying to put you in a box. They can't just let you be you. They have to sort of figure out what is this that I've seen before that I can then attach him to. And I feel like it's a way to get comfortable with you, with me. It's a way to sort of like say, okay, now I can watch this person because I figured out where they are in my head. And the thing that keeps coming up, which I think is hilarious, is over and over again, I keep being told that I am the black Seth Rogen. I don't like that sound. No, and for me it's like, I was all prepared for the Questlove Cornel West comparisons. And when I got black Seth Rogen, I was like, that's weirdly fine. You know, I didn't feel like there was anything, certainly racialized, but didn't feel racist, because nobody said it was like, you like the black Seth Rogen and I hate him. That wasn't, it was just, I feel like it was just people's way of going, okay, I have to put this guy in some sort of context in my head. And it's come from all over, not just one person. So I'm just like, so I feel like that's a lot about the whole, you know, people have to know where to put you, what box to put you in. I'm in the empty black Seth Rogen block. And I saw you get confused with Bobito yesterday.
You were there? Yeah, that was so funny because I met Chris, is Chris Rabb? Is that his name? Chris Rabb? I met him right before I saw you, and he told me that someone had come up to him and thought he was Jay Smooth. So I told him, don't worry, later tonight someone will think I'm Bobito and I'll pay it forward. And 10 minutes after I said that, I was with Kamau and someone came up to me, hey, are you Mr. Garcia? I'm supposed to be doing an interview. And I don't know, and really think I look that much like Bobbito, but I think if you seem to have a similar ethnicity and complexion and are in the same media field, there's some kind of cognitive process where people just connect you that way, because that's been happening for 20 years. So I don't know what insight you can glean from that. But yeah, it's Bobbito and this one guy from Ally McBeal, whose name
Serious 90s reference. I don't get confused with anyone, which upsets me. But but I do like. But I have a master's degree, like most Iranian American Muslim females, a master's degree in African American studies, and I think that I always wish that I was black, and but in growing up, I wish that I was Mexican, and because I grew up in Southern California, and so I feel like a roundabout way of saying there's not that many people who are like ambiguously ethnic looking like I am, who are like a total thing yet. And I've been told in casting sessions frequently, the thing is, Negin, you're too ethnic for this part, and if we went that route, you're not ethnic enough. So my response is always like, I have bronzer in my purse, let me just come back and do some but so we're not there yet where I can be confused with anyone.
So you can't yet be commodified.
Yeah.
Sorry. Other questions? Can we have someone in the back? Oh, right here.
I had a question. I heard a theme of everyone saying like reclaiming comedy, and I was wondering what do you guys really mean by that? Because to me, there is no upper echelons of what's funny. The same way that down Tosh can make a rape joke. Yeah, rape is a horrific crime, but I feel as if you can make me laugh about something like that. That is a talent. And then the talent that's pure, because comedy is that. It's pure because that's what really happens to us. Things like rape, unfortunately, but things that's what makes us laugh because it happened, you know what I'm saying? And the same way that Louis C.K. can say the N-word, and he can make me laugh about it. I think that, so how do we reclaim anything such as that's pure as comedy, because there is no, that's dirty, that's below, that's what my intelligence, my intellect is at, is that's can or cannot be funny.
Can I answer that from the stand-up comic perspective, and then we'll toss it back to the feminist. I think the thing that people forget with comedy, and as a comic, this is always very frustrating, is how highly subjective it is, which is what makes it awesome. Is that, because you said earlier, like if you tell a joke and nobody laughs, then it's not a joke. But the issue is if you tell a joke and everybody laughs, but one person doesn't laugh, to that person it's not a joke. Oh, that's good. And sometimes that's the person who goes on the internet and writes about it. And they don't, literally, and that's, every comic can talk about this phenomenon, the person who's not laughing can't hear the laughter of others. There's good reasons for that. Sometimes the joke is mean, and sometimes the joke is critical of that person, but sometimes they just don't think it's funny. And nothing makes people angrier than a joke they don't think is funny, even if the joke isn't Daniel Tosh. So I think that a lot of times I think we talk about comedy in really monolithic ways, like comedy and funny, but you don't talk about music in that way. You know, we're aware there's different styles of music and different types of music, and we're also aware that you can like misogynistic music, but not actually endorse the policies of misogynistic music. And I think, but people take comedy personally in such a way that, you know, that as a comic, sometimes it's really funny to be on that end of it and realize, no, people will say, you're not funny. And I'm like, no, I'm not funny to you. And that's okay, because I don't like you. Which is what I say every time.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to counter this idea that comedy is pure in some way, because I think that it's a reflection of society in whatever, you know, and I think that, of course, you know, it's special in that nothing's off limits. But I think I'm more interested in not necessarily like a higher, more intellectual form of comedy, because that kind of suggests that like being anti-sexist is like a more intellectual, or being, you know, being anti-racist or being sensitive is somehow more intellectual than like lowbrow forms of comedy, or comedy that perpetuates, you know, problematic ideas about race and gender and all of that stuff. But I just think about how much funnier something could be when you're not making fun of the victim, right? And I think that, you know, that's what Daniel Tosh, like, the problem with that wasn't necessarily that he was making a rape joke, right? I'm going to call on you in a second, actually, to talk about your video, but there was, I think we tried to collect at Feministing, like, a bunch of, like, rape jokes that are funny, and I'm blanking on all of them right now, but there are definitely ways to make them funny, but you kind of just have to think about who the target of the humor is, and I just think consistent, like, I just think the best comedy, and, you know, maybe because it's shared values, you know, because I have shared values in this way, but I really do think the best comedy is this kind of like punching up, because it's actually a target that, you know, we can kind of like be like, oh yeah, we're all the underdog and we can kind of laugh about this, right? Whereas instead of being like, we're the overlords making fun of these like slutty women that get raped, you know, problematic, right? And you made a video, right, Jen? Can you talk about that?
Okay, so I'm Jenn Pozner, and I'm with Women in Media and News, and then I collaborated with, because I had this idea when the Tosh thing happened, there were what media outlets were doing were framing response as comedians versus feminists, as if all comedy was on the side of, hey, gang rape is hilarious against you in the blue shirt in the audience right now, and that anybody who had a problem with that was a humorless feminist, and that wasn't actually the case. So I had this idea of putting together a video that originally the video was going to be a supercut of every rape joke Daniel Tosh has ever made for years on his show, to show that this was not just a one-time thing. And then what that turned out to be, that was impossible, because it would have been, instead of a minute, it would have been like an hour-long video, like for 30 seconds each. So instead, it was Eliza Preisinger, who does Pop Culture Pirate. She's a video remix artist, and she also works at the Women's Media Center now. So then me at Women in Media and News, and then Elisa at Pop Culture Pirate and Women's Media Center put together this video that was a joke. It was called Rape Joke Supercut. I can't believe you laughed for that. And it was basically a remix that looked at the difference between comedy that reinforces rape culture, which is comedy that, as Samhita said, punches down at the victims and reinforces the idea that, like, hey, it's great to be able to get away with it, versus lots and lots of really smart, feminist-oriented jokes about what's wrong with rape, right? So that's up there, and it has everybody from, you know, like George Carlin to Dave Chappelle. There's a bunch of great bits in that, and it's up at, it's part of a piece, it's posted in a piece in which I interviewed Kamau and about 7 or 8 other comedians, Jamie Kilstein and others, about that whole Tosh controversy and power and privilege and identity within comedy. And that's at Fem 2.0. It's called, what was the piece called? Surfing the Rape Wave, which was a quote from Kamau about rape wave in comedy. And, like, yeah, anyway.
I want to point off of that real quick if I can, speak to the original question. One thing that I'm talking about when I talk about reclaiming comedy is that, like I said up front, like, comedy is very subject to financial and social capitalism. So the folks who have the resources are the folks who are spreading their message from the highest mountain. Those are the folks with the TV shows. Those are the folks with that everyone knows, who set the tone for everybody else. And by and large, those folks are not disenfranchised in any real way. They're not making jokes from that perspective. The jokes that they make are not giving agency to I can't use the word victim, but to the victims in these situations. Say what? Survivors. Survivors, thank you. And one thing that the internet is doing, A, is creating new platforms for people to get things, to get that social capital, but B, it's also holding people accountable in new ways, like Jen said. One thing that Daniel Tosh said, that his supporters said, was, oh, that joke was taken out of context. But thanks to the internet, not only did that YouTube video go up and be taken out of context by people, the internet also provided context to show that this was not a fluke, this is part of a major pattern. That's, I think, what I'm talking about when I talk about taking comedy back. Can we do, we're actually over time now, can we do one more question? And I see you in the front before.
Thank you. So I'm thinking about actually.org, and all of you really are doing comedy in service of movement building in some ways. And I think that's almost separate discussion from comedy as art form, that as an individual comic you are expressing your, you're grappling with your own stuff or whatever. And so my question is, when you do more that intentional kind of comedy as art form, like you were talking about, or as movement building, like, do you feel like it's effective, I guess? And is it effective at just like firing up all of us here? Or do we feel like it's reaching out? Like, I'm interested in your perspective on the impact. Or are you just trying it and seeing where it's gonna go? You know what I mean?
I mean, I think it's really hard to evaluate if anything we're doing is effective. I tell my parents that it is so they can just feel okay with having a daughter who's a comedian. That really, they fucked up on that one. But like, I think, here's the thing, and I think, like, we're really, like, in the policy world, really obsessed with, like, numbers and being able to evaluate things, quantitatively, and that's awesome, and it's, like, the kind of work that needs to be done. But there's this other work, which is, like, delivering the rum cake to your neighbor, right? And those are things that you can't quantify, but they have influence, or it's like, you look at, like, Lenny Bruce or something, who started saying cock on stage. Well, I mean, what exactly did that do? Like, you can't really quantify what that did, but what it did was now I say cock on stage constantly, and I get to do it and not get arrested. It's fucking awesome, And so that's the kind of social change that art gives us, and comedy gives us that can't be quantified. And so I don't know what anything that I do what kind of impact it will have in real terms, but I hope that it'll be a small, help it lead to a small shift in the discourse.
I would say that I think about this a lot. If I'm not funny, then I'm not a comedian. So the goal still has to be big, healthy buckets of laughter. And so, because the minute it becomes not funny, for me, it becomes a really bad speech. There are many smarter people who can do that speech than me. And I find that, and I've heard other people say this. I remember when I was coming up in comedy, I would hear comics who I thought were like really important say that it's just jokes. And I was like, you don't know, you're just hiding. But now I get it. If I stop thinking about it as jokes, it's sort of, that's the way I'm effective, is when it's funny. And I sort of think about music, like when you go see like a politically charged musician, I want the song to want to change the world, but if the musician starts talking during the bridge, I'm like, no! When Bono says, everybody out there, no! Sunday bloody shit, yes! And I sort of feel that way about comedy. Like, and we talk about this in the show all the time. If the show isn't pushing towards the joke, then we're not doing the job that the show is doing. Because we can't be caught up in the results. We just have to be caught up in the laughter.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a crucial point, and you can see it all throughout hip-hop. The reason the Public Enemy is one of the most important acts is because musically they were the most avant-garde, aesthetically compelling acts, and then they also had a message on top of it. And that also, being functional aesthetically within your medium always has to be the first priority, or else nobody's going to care about what you're saying. I mean, Public Enemy's music is so powerful that they can say something like, Loopa Troop, Bazooka the Scheme, and it sounds like they're saying something deep. And I mean, how much impact what we do has, I mean, I feel like I do it because it's the thing I can do, and I hope that it contributes something. I think, like you said, it's extremely hard to quantify. I mean, I've had people tell me that they're able to use some of the videos as learning tools, and I think being direct and entertaining and having humor helps people keep listening if it's ideas they might be averse to. And I also think, we tend to try to measure things in terms of whether we're sparking epiphanies in people who aren't with us, but I think there's also a value in making things that help us commiserate and give each other moral support and realize, I'm not the only one who's freaking out while I watch that. And, it helps each other fine-tune our arguments and evolve our own understanding of issues. So I think, I don't think we should think only in terms of are we getting people to come over to our side of the fence? I think there's something, the media that we share with each other, I think also has its own value. And can I say, I think what you were saying about accountability is really important in terms of reclaiming comedy, and I think that the internet's been great for that. I feel like there's been, watching basically from the outside the stand-up comic world, I feel like there's this phenomenon of circling the wagons whenever a comic says something controversial. Things that, comics that must know better will stand by that person like, no, we should never be held, we should be able to say anything. And it's this strange sort of contradiction where we want to be able to be fearless and push boundaries, but we're offended whenever anyone tries to impose boundaries on us. And I don't think it's actually courageous to never take responsibility for anything that you do. Anybody can do that. I think you should be happy to have an audience that is enforcing boundaries and letting you know when you've gone too far. That's what enables you to be a brave comic and pushes boundaries. So I think, all of us who do humor should be able to embrace being able to listen and learn from feedback. I think that's where the real courage is in this art.
I just want to tag what he says as a stand-up comic, because I feel like this: no person is above an apology, and it turns out the stand-up comedians are people. The other thing about stand-up comedy, on the other side of that though, is that stand-up comedy is the only art form where failure has to happen in front of people. You can't go write the joke and perfect the joke in your room and then debut the joke. Failure has to happen in front of an audience. And as a person who sometimes talks to myself, I've failed a lot in front of people and said the wrong thing later, like, man. And I'm really happy there wasn't a blogger in that audience that night. Just because in the process of working it out, failure is a part of the process. That's not an excuse, it's just a part of the process. I'm happy to apologize. I'm sorry.
Me too. And a lot of folks talk about this new thing where someone can record you with an iPhone trying out a joke for the first time and blowing it as a new and transformative event in stand-up comedy. In the same way that the cops showing up to Lenny Bruce's show and bringing the Supreme Court along with them was a transformative event in comedy. A lot of comics are scared shitless of this idea of being accountable to the entire internet for every bad joke they bust out. Kamau is the only one that I've heard who says, I will apologize if I screw up. And I think that says more about stand-up comics. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to throw up the screen here at the end so you folks can see their Twitter handles. I want to thank everyone very much for coming out. Watch his show, watch his videos, watch her documentary, buy her book, give me a hug. Thank you.